Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Thursday, almost to the weekend. I cannot wait. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell. If you want notifications of when I post new content, just click the bell icon. It'll alert you when new things are posted. Music fact of the day. This one blew my mind, y'all. Bob Seger only had one album to be on the Billboard Top 200 album charts. That was Against the Wind back in 1980. He only had one number one hit as well. That was the song Shakedown from the Beverly Hills Cop 2 soundtrack back in 1987. You have to wonder, how did that happen? Or how did that not happen? He had so many good songs. I was jamming out to Still the Same this morning. Great song by him. I've been reading a little bit about Miss Hutchins, just trying to get to know who she was a little better. I found something really cool, and I wanted to share with you guys. In 2018, she was one of the first 8 female cinematographers participating in the Fox DP Lab program. That was established to provide greater opportunities for women cinematographers. And in 2019, she was named one of the 10 up-and-coming directors of photography who are making their mark. It's really just a tragic case. We left off part 1 with Corporal Hancock, finished with her direct exam. We had watched that long video. So my goal for the weekend and through next week is to try to populate all of these cast and crew interviews and put them in a playlist on YouTube. So look for those. If I do it, I'll be laying in my bed, y'all. I'm not even kidding. I'm looking forward to some chill time this weekend, but I don't like to chill too much. Then I feel like I just wasted days. So hoping to get that started this weekend. Let's get back to her cross-exam. The defense talks about her not doing the prop truck warrant until the 27th because she didn't get information from Hannah. She points out she wasn't the case agent at the time, but the defense says that wasn't my question. You said you didn't get the information from Hannah. And she said, if that's what I said, that's what I said. He hands her the search warrant for PDQ Warehouse that she wrote for October 27th. He tells her that she stated under oath that she got a search warrant for the prop truck due to statements about firearms being stored in the truck and after interviewing Hannah. He moves on to say, you made a statement about Hannah unloading the Baldwin gun on the prop cart and asked if she can point out the timestamp in that interview where she said she did. She said, of course, she doesn't know the timestamp for that exact statement. He asked if playing the video of that interview would help, and the judge talks about it being very lengthy. The defense says, I'm just going to show the clip. The prosecution says they object because they don't know what he's going to play. They have a sidebar. When they're finished, they move on. Mr. Bowles says that Hannah said she went outside with Dave Halls about unloading the rounds, and she didn't say anything about the prop cart. And the witness just doesn't agree with him. The defense points out that Baldwin wasn't put in a cop car like Hannah and mentions a photo of him talking on the phone after the shooting and also a video of him talking to Dave Halls. She said she didn't know about the video, but she did see that photo. He mentions her going to the bathroom with Hannah because you were worried she may harm herself. The witness said no, she actually requested me to go with her. Her concern was for her well-being and she was distraught. Well, the defense asked, do you agree that was fairly intrusive? And the witness says that's a question for Hannah. He asked her, did you hear Hannah say it's the worst day of my life and that her life was over? The witness said something to that extent. So he says after knowing that, you take her to the station. And he talks about how they were positioned at the table with her and the other investigator on one side, and then Hannah on the opposite end of the table in her little corner. He also mentions that Hannah said she should probably talk to a lawyer and asked if she heard Detective Telemonte say it would likely be a public defender and it could take all night. And she said yes. He points out she told her it was going to be a few basic questions. The witness says, well, Hannah's response was she was willing to answer a few basic questions. And she also waived her Miranda rights. He said you felt it was okay for her to do that given her distraught state and her saying she might hurt herself. The witness again says she didn't say she was going to hurt herself. He says you didn't tell her Miss Hutchins had passed, and she said she didn't know herself until right before she talked to Mr. Baldwin. He talks about what she said to the prosecution on direct about people who underwent a traumatic event. And the witness mentioned something about what people say. And she said, yeah, I said after a traumatic event, your memory can be affected. She also points out Hannah didn't witness the shooting because she wasn't inside the church. And the defense says, but the statements could be part of being in a traumatic situation. And the witness says theoretically. The defense points out she asked different questions in the second interview than the first. You can use interviews against someone in court. While you were questioning her and being friendly with her, you knew you could use that one day in court. And she says yes. He said before that first interview, she was in a distraught state, and the prosecution objects and they move on. In the first interview, Hannah talked about 3 sources for the ammunition that was on set, and the witness says no. She said in that first interview, they came from Seth Kinney. In the second interview, the defense points out she told you about Billy Ray, Seth, and herself. They move on to talking about the sabotage. In the first interview, Officer Telemonte brings up the idea that it could be the camera crew. The witness says Hannah's response was no. She didn't think they would do that. The defense says that was October 21st, the day of the shooting. So the first mention of that was from your fellow detective. She said, we threw out that theory. And the defense says, what do you mean you threw out that theory? She said, we're just trying to figure out what's going on. So he said, you created a ruse? And she said, no. The defense says, do you think there was any truth to it? She says, no. He says, so you put out a false theory? The prosecution objects. The witness said, we have to figure out where to go in our investigation. He asked if anybody interviewed the camera crew. She said, yeah, it wasn't me. It was another investigator. She doesn't know the results of that interview. She said she would just have to read his reports. They move on to Starline Brass from the second interview. That's the company that made those casings. And the state's experts said those appear to be reloads. Do you agree? There's an objection. The prosecution said she's not an expert in ballistics. But then the defense asked, do you have any reason to doubt him? And she said no. He asked about the reloads and asked if she knew what JS meant, which that's on the box. It means Joe Swanson. That's who manufactured the dummies. He said, you knew after talking to Thel Reed, which is Hannah's dad, he delivered live ammo to the set of 1883. And she said, yes. He asked her, did she investigate the source of the reloads? And she said, no. What's important to law enforcement are the circumstances and just the facts and the evidence from that day. He said, it's fair to say you didn't fully investigate the circumstances of these reloads. And she agrees. He said, you didn't fully investigate because you were focused on that day. And she said, yes. He asked if she has any direct evidence that Hannah grabbed live rounds, and she said no. He said, when you interviewed Sarah, she gave conflicting information. The witness says she didn't do Sarah's initial interview, but in that second interview, her opinion was that she gave conflicting statements. The defense asked if she concluded Seth wanted Hannah fired. She said, the conversation I saw was that Sarah had the ability to fire Hannah because she wasn't pulling her weight. They point out that Hannah was cooperative and provided her phone to law enforcement, and the witness said, yeah. She said she didn't have to write a search warrant for anybody except Alec Baldwin. He says, you concluded Hannah wasn't in the church and she handed the gun to Halls, and then he handed it to Baldwin. The witness says there were conflicting statements in the beginning. There was an objection, and the prosecution says, I don't know what statement he's referring to. But the witness said on the day of the shooting, I interviewed Mr. Baldwin, and he said Hannah handed him the gun. Later, he said it was Dave. Hannah showed Halls the rounds before handing him the gun, correct? And the witness said she showed what was in the cylinder. She did not take the rounds out. The defense asked if she shook the last one before putting it in the cylinder, and the witness says yes. The defense mentions the lack of safety meetings and bulletins not attached to those call sheets, and asked if she ever found any inventory procedures for the guns and ammunition by Rust Productions. She did not. He asked if Seth steered her in any way. Of course, she says no. Then he asked if Seth pushed all this on Hannah. The witness said he may have said something to that extent. She's asked if she's seen the text where he's trying to implicate Hannah, and she has. He asked her if she would agree that Seth is calling her a lot and trying to implicate Hannah, and the witness says that she can't make that assumption. The defense points out that Sarah worked for Seth, and after the shooting, there's a call and text between Sarah and Seth saying there's been a shooting, and the witness corrects him and says, no, it said emergency. He asked her if she investigated the rounds that were thrown away. They did not investigate that because that statement was given over a month after the shooting. The defense points out the search warrant at PDQ warehouse was a month later and talked about Seth could have gotten rid of evidence if he wanted to, and the witness says, yeah, if he wanted to. He asked her if she investigated items that were taken off the cart according to Hannah. She said they searched the prop truck, and she doesn't know exactly which guns went to each actor, so she can't say, but they did follow up on it. The defense says you saw the witness reach over the crime scene tape, and he sort of puts his hand in kind of a cupping motion, and sort of behind his back and asked if she saw him do this motion. The prosecutor said the defense is testifying. The defense says you don't know if he put something on the cart or took something. There's an objection. Prosecution says she wasn't there. The judge tells the defense to move on. You never took Seth's DNA or prints or his phone to be downloaded like the other phones you took. Sarah showed you text messages, but you never got the entirety of his phone. She said it was not a full extraction. The defense says you got Hannah's phone, Sarah's, Hall's, and Baldwin. And she said yes, because they were the ones on set. And the defense says, well, Seth was the supplier of the ammo. There's an objection. Prosecution says that's contrary to the evidence. But the defense says, was Seth the primary supplier to the set? The witness says, I wouldn't say primary, but he was a source. The defense says, isn't it possible his fingerprints would have been on the ammo or the boxes he supplied? And of course, the witness says it's possible. He talks about the blanks and the fingerprints being submitted for testing. And she said, you mean the cartridges? Those aren't blanks. The defense says, you're right. Why is it different than live rounds? The witness says the test wasn't requested by us. The request came from the prosecutor. And he says, given that, I'm trying to figure out why the live rounds couldn't be tested. The witness says, I discussed this several times. I think you heard testimony from the FBI that they wouldn't. She said she also had this discussion with the DA's office, the crime scene tech, the FBI rep. They also took it back to the lab reps for DNA and latent prints. She said there were several statements through my interviews that the live rounds had already been touched. They'd already been handled. This was day 12 of filming. They may have come from other movie sets. The ones in the box had been handled by Sarah. The ones in the weapons by Hannah and Dave. And that's a lot of handling. And it didn't make sense. They knew a lot of people had already had their hands on that. She also reminds him that she told him if he had any issues with that he could discuss that with the DA's office. The defense points out she doesn't know if the rounds appeared on set on day 1 or day 11. And with your statement, you don't know when they came on set, especially if that box had just appeared. You have no idea how long they were on set. And she agrees. He asked her, how many times did Miss Morrissey, the prosecutor, prep you? And she said, it's important to prep with the prosecution for a trial. He asked if she prepped others for interviews. There's an objection. Prosecution says, ask and answer. The judge tells the defense to move on. They talk about 2 calls that she had with Mr. Baldwin that were recorded, but asked, did you have any you didn't record? And she said there may have been. He asked her, is that unusual not to record a call with the suspect? And she said they're not required to record phone calls. He asked about a 13-minute conversation when Baldwin was driving to Vermont. And she said, I'm sure there's one. He asked when she talked to Troy, was Seth Kinney present? And she thinks so. The defense gives her a transcript about Hannah putting rounds on the cart. Now, the defense and the state are going back and forth. And he's at the witness stand. He says something about changing your mind to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor's like, what are you saying, Mr. Bowles? Are you speaking to me? What would you like, sir? He said, the truth. That's what we're trying to get to. I totally had a Few Good Men flashback there. The judge is like, look, I let you guys have coffee in here. Essentially take a sip from the shut up cup. Hannah said that she took all the rounds out. It was there on the cart too. The defense says, do you recall she actually said? The prosecutor laughs and the judge just at this point is like, let's take a break. When they get back, the judge says the interview of Hannah at the police department on the 21st is relevant to both parties. It's in evidence. We're not going to waste more time. The prosecution gets up. She doesn't know where the 4 casings were found on set or who fired them. Mr. Bowles asked you if the stress of the event would affect Hannah's memory. And as a trained law enforcement officer, can the consumption of drugs also affect a person's memory? She says yes. The state says you spoke to Hannah's stepdad at Mr. Bowles' request. When you spoke to Mr. Reed, he told you there's an objection for hearsay. They have a sidebar. The prosecutor has to tiptoe to get the answer that she's looking for. But I'm going to play this exchange. This was a really good exchange between these two. So I'm going to play this audio for you. I think it's better for you just to hear it.
Do you recall your conversation with Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Do you recall the description you were provided from Mr. Reed about the type of bullets that he believed you would find at PDQ?
Yeah, he described...
Nope. Don't say that. Just say yes.
Yes.
Okay. When you conducted the search of PDQ, did you find live ammunition?
Yes, we did.
Was the live ammunition consistent with the description provided by Mr. Reed?
Yes, it was.
Are photos of that ammunition entered into evidence in this trial?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about the photograph of the box of ammunition that Ms. Gutierrez showed you during the interview. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Why is the description or appearance of that box important for this investigation?
Because the photo that she had shown me matches the box that we found on Rust that she identified as the box she was using.
And what did you find inside that box that was noteworthy?
Live ammunition.
Okay, so we're back. I thought this was a very strong moment for the prosecution. So they move on. Mr. Bowles asked about whether or not there were safety meetings on set. And in your conversation with Hannah, did she ever indicate she was concerned or complained about safety meetings? On the November 9th interview with Hannah and Mr. Bowles, did you provide safety bulletins during that interview? Yes. Did it appear Hannah had ever seen them before in her life? She says no. They move on to talk about the prop truck not being secured by law enforcement between the day of the incident, the 21st and the 27th. Prosecutor says you were present in court when Miss Walters took the stand. She testified under oath the prop truck was padlocked, and after the incident, she intentionally changed the padlock. The only person she permitted to get into the prop truck in that time frame was the defendant. She said yes. Did Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Kinney, Mr. Bowles, did they call you numerous times? Yes. Did Mr. Bowles have other potential witnesses contact you? Yes. In your conversations with Mr. Bowles, did he implicate Mr. Kinney? She said that seemed to be the direction he was going. Did Mr. Reed implicate Mr. Kinney? And she says yes. So based on that information, what did you do? She said, well, we followed up and we got a search warrant, executed it, and seized items. Did that information produce any usable evidence Mr. Kinney provided the live ammo to the set of Rust? She says no. Then she asked, why did you stop pursuing the lead? The witness says there was no evidence that supported the evidence Mr. Bowles was giving me. Was there any information Mr. Kinney was on the set of Rust prior to the death of Miss Hutchins? No. You sent the ammo box from Mr. Kinney for fingerprints and DNA. Would you expect his fingerprints to be on ammunition he provided? Yes. The defense said I asked you to spend the 4 spent casings for print analysis. Did you tell me it was highly unlikely it was going to yield any results? Yes. And were you correct? Yes. In preparation for your testimony, did you meet with me? Yes. And did I tell you what to say? She says yes, y'all. And the prosecution, like her eyes got so big, like, what? You see Hannah whisper to Mr. Bowles. There's a little movement in the courtroom. This woman's been on the stand pretty much a whole day. So I don't hold it against her. But the prosecution is trying to reel her in, and she still hasn't clicked that she said the wrong thing. And the prosecution is finally like, did I ask you to lie? And she's like, no. On November 9th, did it appear Hannah had been prepped by her attorney? Yes. So that was it for the prosecution. I don't know really that this sabotage theory is going to go far with the jury. The next witness is Gabrielle Pickle. She was a good witness. She was a line producer on Rust. Essentially, she handles the budget. She did talk to Hannah about getting additional armorer days. It depended on the schedule. She said they were scheduled for 5 days of blanks, but that expanded as the production moved along. It became 7 days, and then by the end, they had 10 armorer days for Hannah. She was given additional days, actually double what she was originally scheduled for. On the day of the shooting, they had filmed for 12 days. Hannah asked for additional training days, but it involved a minor who did not fire a weapon in the movie, and the witness denied that for insurance purposes. She did not ask for more training days with Alec. It was going to be Alec and the minor for the minor to learn how to shoot a gun, not because Alec needed more time. She expressed concerns to Hannah about leaving firearms unattended through an email dated October 14th and then in person. She suggested a type of a logging system for checking in and out firearms. Hannah responded in an email. She didn't agree to that. She said it was too complicated to do in between scenes, and they had an end-of-the-day system they were working with. The witness had an in-person meeting with Hannah and someone named Brian, who is a production designer. The production designer is over everything as far as looks of the film, including armor, and someone named Roe. Hannah said she didn't feel torn between props and armor duties, and she was focused more on her armor duties than she was props. She asked for more prop support from Hannah on prop days when Hannah was not acting as an armorer. She offered Hannah a collaboration of offers between production and the art department in the form of admin support, like organizational support to take paperwork off of her so that she could focus more on her duties on set. After that meeting, Hannah never said she was spread too thin, and they had a good plan to move forward. Hannah never told the witness that Alec wasn't paying attention during his firearm training with her. She said there is a difference in pay between the armorer and the props, with the armorer getting paid more. The witness and Hannah talked early on in Hannah's hire about the witness keeping track of Hannah's days on set. And then once the production wrapped, they were going to submit that to the union to count towards her qualification, but the witness doesn't think it was armor specific. The prosecution shows the witness a document signed by both her and Hannah. It's to seek reimbursement for armor expenses. One of those was for an inertia puller. I looked it up. It's a way to disassemble loaded ammo. So on cross, in the hiring process, it was a collaboration with producers and witnesses. The hiring process, a lot of people had input. The decision was made to hire her. The witness made the offer to Hannah. She said it was from the top down as far as people deciding to hire Hannah, and everybody signed off. Her official title was key props assistant and the armorer. In an armorer position, the witness signed off on 10 armorer days. How many days of filming? And the witness says 22 or 23. The defense says, well, out of that 22 or 23, less than half of those, she would be in an armorer position. And the defense asked how many training days had happened by that point, and the witness didn't know. Training day was when Hannah was with actors and producers. He asked, do you know how many people were there? She said, I know there were producers. She was there for the first training for an hour and then had to leave, but multiple actors trained that day and also a handful of crew. So she estimated 7 to 12 people. Hannah started off with general training and then worked with them individually. Baldwin wasn't even in the state at that point. He did attend training with her, and all she knows, it was on her schedule. He asked, did Hannah request cross-training with him? And she doesn't recall. On non-Blake days, those were prop days. She learned a lot from Hannah's training and said she was impressed. He asked if she called the police on the camera crew that was leaving, and she said no. She said it wasn't a pleasant interaction, but she was just making sure they got their things. With all that, it delayed the start of the day by hours. They were actually working on figuring out how to make up the time. At what point in the schedule could they fit this in? And also, the new camera team was learning the equipment. That day was an armorer day, and Hannah was approved for that the day of the shooting, by the way. The defense asked, why were there no more training days? And she said they weren't needed. The only instance where additional days were asked for was for the minor. He shows her a text thread between her and Hannah. He asked if Hannah actually had 8 armor days compared to 10. She said it could have been 8 on set and 2 training days, but she could check pay stubs. Then he says, you're aware you're under subpoena and we may recall you. So the prosecution asked to approach the bench. She's a little nervous because she's like, you could tell she's eyeballing what's happening at that sidebar. But when he gets back, he said, if that's your memory. She knew of one accidental discharge on set. The witness asked someone to investigate that, and the person did talk to Hannah and ultimately felt good about the precautions that they had in place. She didn't know about the second accidental discharge until 3 or 4 days after the incident. He asked if there was an investigation done after she learned of that second one, and did she do anything personally? And she said at that point, everything was shut down. She learned from attorneys after the shooting of that second discharge. On redirect, they have her read the whole text thread when she told Hannah there would be no more training days. And Hannah says, right on. Well, the defense objects and says that the prosecution is reading from something that's not admitted. The prosecution asks if she can just refresh the witness's memory. And the judge says no, but just don't read. The prosecution asked if she responded right on. And the judge again says something. Then the prosecution asked if she knew what Hannah responded. And then the witness said right on. The text confirmed, by the way, that Hannah knew she had 10 of those armorer days. And also, had filming gone on more, she could have had more days added. The prosecution mentions the delay in filming on the 21st would mean that Hannah was free to go inspect her dummy rounds and do any other work she needed to do. And the witness agrees. She also points out Hannah didn't bring the accidental discharge to the witness's attention. It was actually a cameraman. That was it. I won't have today's recap out until tomorrow afternoon. I've got a really busy morning, but it's coming. And then by Saturday, we should be all caught up with everything. I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon.